Hi, I'm Derek, and welcome back to Fun Scale Models. This series focusing on building the Park Flyer P-40C Tomahawk. And this got some progress here on the landing gear. So this is just a section from the plans itself. It does give you the full size of the tubing that you're going to use. So you've got the main 5/32 diameter tube. That's what goes actually in the landing gear pod and the wing. You've got this inner tube. It's a square tube that would fit over this round tube. So you've got 1/16 inch piano wire, this tube that slides over it, and this slides over that. You can see what I've done right there as well. I've also used easy connector. Basically, they're the rings that can hold the easy connector in place for the standard size. They work really good as stoppers. So I'm using one here as the stopper for the wheel to be able to hit, and here it is a stopper for when it goes into the wing. One of the things that I showed on one of the very early videos was these Dubro tires that are about the right size for scale. They don't have obviously a very scale hub on them, and one other thing I noticed is the axle area is very, very thin. So you get a lot of wobbling potential, and they were quite a bit bigger than the 1/16 that I was using. So I used the same brass insert here, and I've glued that in place. Also, I've done just using some masking tape and wrapping it around the wire just to sort of give it some more, a little bit more of a scaled touch. This, of course, will be painted the appropriate color and will help just add a little bit of dress up to the model. Previously, we had worked on the tire here. I've actually painted a little bit of the inside rim black as well. Next are the hub caps. What you'll do, just like we do with some of the canopy parts, you'll cut along the outer line, you'll fold along the double line, and then using spray adhesive, attach the two parts to each other to make a thicker ply of paper. While these are drying, I've noticed that the cut line or the mark line on the outer section here is a bit challenging. So I've got just a simple circular template. I'll go ahead and I'll mark that over the top of it and use it to cut out. Now, speaking of cutting out, you can use a circular mat cutter if you happen to have one. I do, but I'm actually going to do this freehand just because I want to show that you can do it without that special tool. And there you can see where I've marked with a black pen. I decided to do it around both of them just because black pen will blend in with the tire itself. I'll let the ink and the glue dry thoroughly before I start cutting these out. To help in alignment later, I'm going to use a pin to mark the center point of each part. And I'll go ahead and cut those with the scissors. So here I have the part cut out. I did have to make a small pilot hole to fit over the brass tubing here. I put the tubing a little bit too far out. But once I set it in place, it fits quite well. I'll put some glue around the outside and glue it in place. Here is the completed landing gear strut. You can see both sides of it. It mounts right in here, just like that one. This is the plastic retainer clip made from a soda bottle. This loops over the landing gear strut itself and gets pushed back. And then a small screw holds it in place. That keeps the gear from falling out if you have a loose fit. So we're at the point now where we can start adding the logo details, the flying tiger itself and the shark mouth. One thing I noticed when printing this is it's a bit difficult to see where the teeth marks are on the printed tissue. So what I did was I printed myself up a paper template and cut out the teeth marks. I'm going to lay that over like this and use this carefully to cut out the shark mouth. And here you can see the flying tiger and the shark mouth applied. There is a cockpit you can add. It's a nice little bit of detail. Obviously there's some additional parts in here like the rear canopy. We've already installed that. But each one of these parts, you know, the right panel, the left panel, the bottom, all of them you just hand cut out and start installing into the model. We'll first do the hatch and then the rear cockpit. So the rear section here gets glued into the back of this right here. You want to be able to make sure you do some dry fitting first just to make sure it'll fit. And you also attach the headrest to this part. The cardstock instrument panel gets glued to the face of IP, and then these are the backs of machine guns. Those parts get glued right in here. The instrument panel and the rears of the guns have been added to the cockpit area and the hatch, as well as the headrest and the rear section of the canopy. I've also installed the cockpit floor, and I've had to cut out this section of the floor to fit on top of the removable hatch. Next we add this switch box right here. That gets scored along those 3 lines and then glued to a piece of scrap 1/8. That then gets attached to the left panel. The chair is pre-bent in these areas here, and these tabs go underneath and are glued to the bottom of the seat. As you can see here, our seat is basically done. There are these 2 sections that go on the outside. This goes on the back, and then the seat belts go over the top of that. We're going to focus next on the window opening and closing crank. This is just a piece of scrap balsa wood that I've painted black. I believe there's some parts you can use in the lightning holes in the model. Otherwise, you can use a sharpened tube to create this. This, as you can see, gets folded over, and this is glued onto that. Throttle quadrant gets glued to this scrap piece of paper. So this, of course, goes on top of that. You fold down the sides, and then you add this on the top area here. So the cockpit panels are ready to install. We've got the throttle and the switch box and the roller arm for closing and opening the window. I've checked to make sure that they fit in, and we'll go ahead and install those next. Here you see the completed seat and control unit. The straps have been added, as well as the control stick that was made from a toothpick. There's also instructions in the plans to make a paper one should you prefer. On the bottom of the seat is a magnet. This is the same size magnet that we use to hold the hatch on. And here is the completed profile pilot. As you can see, there's 2 sides to him, and he can sit pretty much right in the cockpit, and then you can add the hatch on top of it. And when the airplane's flying by at high speed, it looks like there's actually somebody in it. Installing the ailerons is pretty straightforward. You can see here I've turned the airplane on and had the aileron servos centered. I've put the 1/32 wire with a Z-bend into it. It's important to put the Z-bend on this side of the horn versus this one. If it was flipped around, there's a possibility that this little piece right here could actually hit the servo mount itself. I'm going to be using the micro control horns like I had mentioned earlier, as well as the easy connector. I've already drilled this out and attached the easy connector. Next, I'm going to go ahead and slide the easy connector down. And what I'm really looking for here is probably where is the best spot to drill the hole. So what I'm seeing more than likely is along this line will be just fine. It makes it a little bit easier for us. The other thing that you want to try and do is to sort out the actual line itself. So ideally perpendicular to this line would be best. So I'm going to go ahead and make a slight indent in the balsa right there. What I'll do next is I'll use my pin vise to drill a small hole. We'll trim this up so it doesn't go all the way through the top of the tissue, and go ahead and mount the horn. So we have our hole there. I've trimmed this up to be so it won't go through, and let's go ahead and we'll set it in place. And what I will do next is I'll drop CA in there to glue that in. I've found that if you get a good soaking of CA, that's more than strong enough for this, this type of model. The other thing I did mention earlier is you want to make sure, at least I prefer to do it this way, so that the bolt that holds this in place, or the screw that holds this in place, is on the outside. It's much easier, I think, to get at it from this direction than trying to mount and tighten the screw from this direction. We'll go ahead and we'll glue this in place, and we'll trim this off right about right here in case we need to do any additional adjusting, and we'll show the finished product after that. And here you can see the completed hookup. So we've got the set screw in tight and the horn well mounted. And as you can see here, we have sufficient throw. We'll go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other half of the wing. The tail push rods are connected the same way. Here you can see the retainer clips over the wire and locking it into the control horn. To allow for proper cooling for the motor, this section here was always intended to be trimmed open to allow air exiting. One thing I've also done just as a scale feature is I've created this. These are fake cowl flaps. I'll go ahead and add these, and that should allow a sufficient amount of airflow over the motor, past the motor, and exiting back here.